Ach, not her samurai.
Jin Sakai has been proven to be one of gaming's most interesting main characters of recent years. Just as the game in which he exists, Ghost of Tsushima, has clearly become one of the PlayStation 4's best games and primary reasons to own one. The game is also one of PlayStation Studios' longest, with it needing at least 50 to 60 hours of your time if you intend to see everything it has to offer. As such, Ghost of Tsushima is a game that has plenty of content and story development. Before we go ahead, a quick request. We upload new videos every single day, and your subscription matters a lot. So, please consider subscribing and enabling all notifications by clicking the bell icon. With that out of the way, let's begin. This, of course, means that players of the game will have plenty of time with the game's protagonist, Jin Sakai, and thankfully very little of that time feels like filler. One of the game's more impressive features is that, despite the length and depth of the experience, it rarely feels like you're just going through the motions in its various side quests, and much of what you'll be doing is getting a deeper and deeper look into this interesting and engaging main character. So, let's take a moment to celebrate and examine the work that was put into Jin Sakai, the main character of Sucker Punch's newest adventure.
This is not our way. Your way can't save our people. The Shogun will demand a head. But it does not have to be yours. I know she drove you to this. Uncle, renounce the ghost.
Keep in mind, this examination of Jin and his role in the game will be going over some decisive story beats in the game, so in order to avoid having those spoiled for you, I highly recommend playing the game yourself first, then coming back to this. Jin started life in a very stringent atmosphere. Discipline and honor were the monikers of his upbringing. Being raised in Japan's upper class, much was afforded to and expected of him. That said, his strict training regimens were not the only aspect of his upbringing that would color his adult life. Jin lost his mother very early in life to an unspecified illness, which caused him to fall down a spiral of denial and grief. At the end of the spiral was Jin running off alone to search for her in the woods, and subsequently getting lost for 3 days, before eventually being found by his father. This early exposure to traumatic loss of family members would surely harden Jin to a degree, but not as much as how he lost his father, who was killed by a bandit while Jin hid from the commotion. The fact that Jin couldn't bring himself to try to help his father during this pivotal moment is one that would loom over him forever, but it would also fuel his desire to be the best samurai he could be under the guidance of his uncle, Lord Shimura, who would advise, instruct, and effectively raise Jin through the remainder of his young life. Despite how well Lord Shimura mentored Jin through life and prepared him for the honorable life as a samurai, he would ultimately shed that part of himself one day. By the time the story of the game begins, Jin Sakai is not just a guy fighting to protect himself and his loved ones from the Mongol invasion of the late 1200s. That might have been fine for a character of his type in another game, but here, he's much more complex. At first, it does seem that his journey could be more or less summed up by Jin wanting revenge for the game's opening battle, which ended with Jin's uncle, Lord Shimura, captured and Jin himself mortally wounded. Perhaps if Jin were cut from a different cloth, that would have been all there was to it, but thankfully for him, he was slowly brought back to fighting strength by resident bandit Yuna. Jin, being somebody who came from relative privilege growing up, had clearly not seen much exposure to Japan's lower class. Being raised around the ruling class of the shogun and samurai, and groomed for excellence his entire life, did not provide the perspective that he could now see up close. Yuna took it upon herself to explain to Jin that the vast majority of their beloved island of Tsushima had already been captured by the Mongols, and any further engagement with samurai living by their code would likely end similarly to how his last battle did. Given that Jin had likely never really been exposed to this opinion, he would struggle with the reality that real wars are not the formulaic exercises that he had been taught. Not every enemy would have a similar code of ethics to what the samurai held so dear. The Mongols were proof of that. They had no interest in fights being fair and honorable. They felt no need to inform their enemy of their intentions, nor treat their captives with any semblance of respect. This fact, as unavoidable as it was, put Jin in a lot of inner turmoil. How can he successfully defend his homeland while still staying true to what he was taught? He was not yet emotionally or mentally prepared to accept that it would be impossible to do both of those things. Still, regardless of how he was going to evolve later on, Jin's discovery that his uncle was being held captive by the Mongols was more than enough to bring him to his feet and attempt to free Lord Shimura. He managed to get past several guards, but when it came time to confront Khotun Khan and save his uncle, instead of a heroic rescue, the excursion would end, with Jin being thrown from a bridge by Khotun Khan himself. Jin did manage to get one good strike on the Khan's face, but obviously that would not be enough. This would only add to the credibility of the idea that Jin would need to get a little more creative before he would be ready to rescue much of anybody, let alone Lord Shimura or the entire island of Tsushima. This is when the true rebellion starts. Not just the rebellion of Tsushima from Mongol control, but also the rebellion of Jin from his proper samurai roots. Jin was at a point in his life and in this journey where he had no reason to think that the traditional samurai tactics and techniques he had been trained in for years would be enough to get him through this struggle. He had already been defeated twice, seen his uncle captured, and his home taken captive because of these tactics. Given that, Jin would start his inevitable and fundamental change. Bombs, smoke grenades, flaming arrows, poison, you name it. If it existed and could aid him in taking out Mongols, he would use it. While crossing paths with Yuna, Taka the blacksmith, Ishikawa the archer, Ryuzo the leader of the Ronin mercenaries, and others, Jin would slowly but surely do favors for these folks and gain their trust, while getting a deeper look at their lives and more appreciation for their struggles, further humbling him and gaining him allies as he continued to liberate various farms and villages throughout Tsushima. As he advanced, he would start to garner a reputation as the Ghost of Tsushima. Eventually the time would come for Jin and his merry band of mercenaries to combine their efforts and storm Castle Canada, take it back from the Mongols, and rescue Lord Shimura. Given the new tactics and weapons of the Ghost, Jin would be derided and criticized by Shimura, and would cite all of the reasons that Jin already knew as to why this was the wrong way to pursue his goals. Jin hated disappointing his uncle, but he was already too deep into it to turn back now. He had already seen the failures of his uncle's ways and the success of the ways of the Ghost, and had made his choice. A pivotal moment for the game, sure, but much more so for Jin himself.
I trained you to fight with honor.
Honor died on the beach. The Khan deserves to suffer.
You are ruled by your emotion.
I sacrificed everything I knew to save our people. I gave them hope. You did nothing! No. We're finished.
The story of Jin continues on from there, much like how it was going leading up to the assault on Castle Canada. More of Jin's fellow citizens are discovered and learned about. Jin's knowledge of how the real world works grows, and so does his reputation as the Ghost of Tsushima and the liberator of the island. Once Khotun Khan and the Mongols are defeated, Jin soon realizes that his greatest battle still has yet to be finished. Lord Shimura, despite the victories his nephew had earned for Japan, now seeks to execute Jin on behalf of the shogun. This was the real watershed moment of the game, and arguably of Jin's life. After Jin defeats Shimura, he, or rather you, decide whether or not to give him the honorable death he asks of Jin, and that decision brings an end to this particular journey. Jin goes through much more than most similar characters in this sort of story. Yes, he transforms from the more conservative samurai to a more resourceful, albeit morally questionable assassin, but he also saves his fellow citizens in the process. He rescues his uncle and defeats countless Mongols, but pays a huge price for it in the end. At that point, the concepts of right and wrong are interpretive. Jin realizes this, puts his pride aside, and ultimately makes his own decisions so he can achieve the goal of saving his home. While Jin does still maintain the calmness and mastery over his emotions that he was taught as a child, he also now knows what that strictness can lead to if not occasionally influenced by a changing reality. That's all for now. If you enjoy what you saw, please hit the like button. And if you're new to the channel, now is a great time to subscribe. We upload brand new videos every single day. After subscribing, don't forget to enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon. Thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you next time, right here on Gaming Bolt.